Welcome to my red panda infographic. Now the visual potentials that I made are number, location, appearance, relationship, and time. Now the first numbers display I made is this size comparison diagram where the red panda is compared to other mammals. I emulated this really well because in my model there's black silhouettes, colored circles with white numbers with them, and then white numbers in general, as you can see here. This is the white numbers, this is the circles with the numbers within, and these are the silhouettes. Now the limitation in this part and in a lot of my other parts is that there is no subtitles, because in my model it doesn't have subtitles. So I tried my best to make it easy enough for the person to realize what it is without having a subtitle. So for this, people can easily see that it is a size comparison, since it is, it's different mammals side by side with the height on top of them. Now for this infographic, it represents the estimated population of red pandas in each place. Now this part I also emulated my model really well, where there is black silhouettes and white numbers. And for this I created an isotype, so each of these silhouettes represent 1,000 red pandas. And I also emulated the white line, which they use in their diagrams too. Now the same limitation applies to this, in that there is no subtitles, so it takes the user longer to realize what it is without the subtitle. But I also try to make this easy enough for the user will quickly identify. And then for the location, I made a map and showing the current range of red pandas. Now for this part, I also emulated my model really well, in that they have countries and they use a color to represent the range, but they use gray to represent the previous range. So one of the limitations in my diagram is that I couldn't find the information of the previous range, so it gives less information to the user than I would like. And I also included this red oval with white letters giving more information about red pandas, which they also use in their tiger infographic. And another difference is that I decided to section off each country's territories, unlike theirs where it's all put together, because I didn't have the previous range. So if I just did that, it would look like a giant blob, and people said that they wanted to see the separation, and I made the reddish brown opaque, a little more opaque, so you can see the divide, so people can see like where it actually crosses the border. Now for the appearance, I made a photo cutout of the red panda, and I made a lot of icons. So a lot of icons, and even the flag icons. And then for the appearance display, yes, that's what I did. And then for the relationship, I made a relational diagram representing threats to red pandas, and I emulated this part of the diagram where there's white bordered circles. I just made it more relational, and a limitation to this is that it doesn't give more context. Like, it doesn't give you more information about a habitat loss, deforestation. So I only put annotations underneath the ones that I thought needed more explanation. So one of the limitations is that it doesn't give you as much information as I would like. Maybe it's because of the shape of the infographic or the limited size that it was on. But yes, that was one of the limitations. And lastly, the time diagram, where I made a timeline of the history of daring red panda escapes. I emulated the white circle and the white line, and I also tried to emulate the circle in this case, but I used a red line, so this is basically a pin. This part doesn't emulate my model, but I thought it was a good way of representing, where it stops in the timeline. And a limitation to this diagram is that it doesn't have a subtitle, and also it doesn't have enough space for me to write the story of what happened. So people don't know the context. They only know that they escaped, but they don't know how they escaped, or like what were the circumstances. So that was pretty sad. But I thought this would be enough information that the user will want. And for encoding, I used color, amount, and position. For color encoding, I pretty much used reddish brown to represent anything related to red pandas. And I used amount encoding in the ISO type, where one red panda silhouette equals 1,000 red pandas, and position in the size comparison diagram, where the red panda size is relative to the other mammals. Now, the colors I use are light blue to represent the sea, and then brownish red, black, white, and gray. Now, I did not emulate my model perfectly because my emulate has orange instead of reddish brown. My reasoning behind changing it to reddish orange is because the infographic I was trying to emulate is about tigers, and tigers have orange fur, while red pandas have reddish brown fur. So that's where my justification comes in, because I changed the color. Now, the white is usually is a color used to highlight stuff. It's mostly used to highlight numbers and to highlight elements when there is a reddish brown background. And encoding is the reddish brown I used to differentiate my red panda from the other mammals. And then, so the trigger associations, I wanted to trigger that the light blue equals the sea, and then the reddish brown equals red pandas. Now, the tone that I was trying to set with my color choices is, a warm and cozy. No colors are too sharp. There's not like a sharp contrast within each of the colors, because red pandas are cute and fuzzy. So I didn't want to so I wanted to try and get that message through to the user. And the caramel harmony I have is monochrome. Now, the text that I used are Rockwell and Arial. The Rockwell text is used for the title, and the Arial is used for everything else. Now, the text I try to keep the text as uniform as I can. So the text down here, everything down here, are the same size, and the subtitles are also the same size. And then, so this emulates my model in the sense that they used Rockwell for their title, and then they used Arial for everything else, which is exactly what I did. I guess the limitation to that would be there's not much variation, and some people might not like that, but I like that it's nice and uniform. And then text is also used to identify the silhouettes, red pandas, dogs, humans, and then these where it identifies the different types of fruit, which is relative to the icons. And then it's also used to annotate my red panda. Now, the labels are associated by either a white dashed line pointing to the feature, or they are put under the silhouette and the diagrams, so that people can just know that it's related, that this annotation is for that part. Yes, that's it. And for visual hierarchy, I used size and color. So, the size is the size of each section and size of the text, and the color is the amount of red within that section. So, in the beginning, I want people to know to notice the title. So it's big white text on a darker reddish brown background, so that it'll pop more. And then I want them to focus on this big section with the giant red panda. And then I want them to focus on where the red panda comes from. And then I want them to focus on the threat of the red pandas. And then the history of their escapes. And then the size comparison. And then maybe the diet. And then the population. And how much red is used in the next section is pretty, it draws attention. So the more red I use in each section, people will be drawn to that more because it's different. It's not just black on blue, it's red, white on blue, or red on blue. So this will draw people's attention more than this black text. And within each section, there are also visual hierarchies in the sense that the threats to red pandas circle is bigger than the others because that's a subtitle. Same with the history of daring red panda escape. This and the text is bigger than the other texts. And even within this, I wanted people to focus on the red panda and then the map, which is in the background of the red panda. And with the title, I wanted people to notice the title first and then the classification. So the unity and variety in my infographic is that I repeat color, texture, size, shapes, and font. So I repeat the color of brownish red throughout the whole infographic. I keep the texture as just a solid color. And then, I'm going to go back to visual hierarchy, where I want people to know about the infographic. We want people to know about the red panda first, and then where the red panda comes from, and then threats to red panda, and then the timeline of the red pandas, and then the food size, and then the other information that I think would be useful to the user. Now back to unity and variety. So unity and variety unity is created with a repeat of color, texture, size, shape, and font. So I repeat the color of reddish brown for the whole infographic to represent red pandas. The texture is solid colors. The size is that I keep the font size all the same for each element, except for the title and the classification, and then the subtitles. All the other texts are all the same color. And then the shapes, I reuse the circular circles throughout the whole in my relational timeline and even my map infographic. I reuse those. And then the font I will keep the same except for the title. Now this part emulates my model really well in that they use circular elements and then they also use circular elements, and their font is all the same except for the top. Now the variety I use is the circular element versus the silhouettes or the icons, and then the photo cutouts and the pins. So the photo cutout emulates my model really well because it does have a photo cutout. The silhouettes also emulate my model very well because they also have silhouettes and icons. in the infographic. But the pins deviate from my infographic, but I thought it was a better way of representing, the time on the timeline that I want to pinpoint. I still tried to keep the circular-ish shape, but I just added a more sharper pointer so people can see. So it doesn't deviate too far, but it's still a deviation. And I feel like the variety of the different things I put are also pretty, they have a nice uniform look to it, in the sense that none is more than the other. Now my layout is separated by white dashed lines to cut off each section, and a definitive white line to give the header its own section. Now this emulates my model really well, in that they also use my layout model really well, because they also use white dashed lines for each section, and then they have a definitive block for the title. Now the limitation to this would be that the sidebar has to all be uniform. They all have to have a uniform width, but they might not have a uniform height. And it cuts really cleanly and lets people know where everything begins and where everything ends, but it may have been a little bit too blocky for some users. Now, even though each section is separated, I feel like overall it groups together really well, and it just makes the infographic flow nicely. And for alignment, there's alignment everywhere in my infographic. On the sides, the texts are all aligned. There's a buffer on this side that goes down to the whole thing. On the bottom, on the right side, there's also a border, and then on this side there's also a border. So for the whole infographic, there's a border around it that no letter goes through, and then within each infographic, within each element of the infographic, there's also borders. There are also alignments that they have. So everything is at least left aligned, so that you can it's nicer to see. Left and right aligned. Top and bottom aren't as aligned, but there's also some padding to it, so it doesn't look too cramped. And this is also the timeline and the huge section I have are also aligned with this part, where there's just all text. Texts are all aligned with my circles. And this emulates my model really well, in that there is alignment everywhere. There's alignment here. There's alignment on the bottom, and then within each there's also alignment. They have the same amount of padding for each section, which my infographic doesn't show, because my top and bottom paddings are different, but my left and right paddings are same for the whole row. Yes, so that is one of the limitations I have. And thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you later.